There is a place on this earth where time moves differently, where the morning doesn't begin with an alarm, a phone screen, or the hum of a coffee machine, but with the sound of cattle bells echoing across a valley that has remained almost completely unchanged for thousands of years. A place so remote, so untouched, that to reach it, you don't just travel by plane or by car. You travel backward through centuries, through silence, through a version of human life that most of the world has completely forgotten was ever possible. That place is the Omo Valley, in the deep south of Ethiopia. And the people who call it home are the Mursi, one of the last truly isolated tribes on the planet. But here is what nobody tells you before you go. By the time you arrive, part of it is already gone. The Omo Valley sits in a region that scientists call the Cradle of Mankind. The land itself is ancient beyond comprehension. Archaeological discoveries here have uncovered human remains dating back 2.4 million years. This is not just a place where a tribe lives. This is the ground where our entire species took its first steps. And yet, despite everything this land represents, despite the irreplaceable weight of its history, it is being quietly, systematically, and permanently erased. The Mursi number only around 10,000 people. 10,000. In a world of 8 billion, that is not a population, that is a footnote. They live along the banks of the Omo River in small clusters of 100 to 200, building their homes from tree branches and reeds, moving when the seasons change and the land demands it. They have their own language, their own laws, their own medicine, their own understanding of the sky, the river, and the soil. Knowledge that exists nowhere else on Earth. Knowledge that is carried not in books or databases. The men carry wooden staffs and move through the landscape with a quiet authority that tells you everything about how long their people have known this land. Children run barefoot through the dust with a freedom that is almost painful to witness when you know what is coming for them. And something is coming. In 2015, the tallest dam in Africa was switched on. The Gilgel Gibe III, a 250-meter wall of concrete planted directly in the path of the Omo River, captured the river's waters and ended the annual floods that the Mursi and every other tribe in this valley had built their entire way of life around for generations. Those floods weren't just water. They were food. They were medicine. They were the rhythm that told people when to plant, when to move, when to celebrate, and when to rest. When the floods stopped, everything that depended on them began to collapse. Then came the sugarcane. Hundreds of thousands of acres of indigenous land that the Mursi had grazed, farmed, and walked for centuries, was handed over to commercial plantations. Their forests were cleared. Their beehives were destroyed. Their cattle were blocked from ancient grazing paths. And when some of them tried to resist, or simply tried to move through land they had always known as their own, they were met by soldiers. Then came the resettlement programs. The government solution was to build them new villages, fixed, permanent settlements, and tell them to stop moving. But the Mursi are nomadic. Movement is not just a habit for them. It is survival. It is the entire architecture of how they live. Asking a Mursi family to stop moving is not offering them a better life. It is asking them to slowly forget how to be who they are. And then, perhaps most quietly and most devastatingly of all, came the modern world. Phones, roads, tourism. A new generation of young Mursi men and women who look at the life their parents are living and begin to wonder if there is something else on the other side of the hills. Not because they want to abandon their people, but because the world they were born into is becoming harder to survive in by the year, and the outside world is pulling at them with a force that no tradition, however ancient, can fully resist. This is the story of a people at the edge of a disappearance. Not the dramatic, sudden disappearance of war or disaster, but the slow, quiet kind. The kind where one morning the elders are still here, and the ceremonies are still happening, and the children still know the songs, and then one morning, not so far from now, they don't. The kind where a language spoken by 10,000 people fades until there is no one left who remembers it. The kind that the world tends not to notice until it is already too late. I went to the Omo Valley because I wanted to see it before it was gone. What I found was something far more complicated than a tragedy. I found people who were still dancing, still painting their bodies with ochre and chalk, still gathering at the river, still laughing, still very much alive, and fighting, in ways both visible and invisible, to stay that way. This is their story. And this is what I found. To understand why the Mursi matter, you first have to understand the land they come from. The Omo Valley is not easy to reach. It sits in the far southwestern corner of Ethiopia, past the highlands, past the last paved road, past the point where your phone stops finding signal and the landscape shifts from green and cultivated to something wilder and older and harder to name. The air is different here. Drier. Heavier. The kind of air that makes you feel like you've crossed a threshold into a different chapter of the planet's story. And in a very real sense, you have. This valley is part of the Great Rift Valley, the enormous geological scar that runs from the Middle East down through the heart of Africa, and which scientists believe is the very birthplace of the human species. The ground beneath your feet in the Omo Valley has surrendered fossils and stone tools and human bones dating back millions of years. Discoveries made here have fundamentally reshaped our understanding of where we come from and how long we have been walking this earth. UNESCO recognized it as a World Heritage Site not because it is beautiful, though it is, but because it is, in the most literal scientific sense, the origin point of all of us. The Omo River is the valley's lifeline. It runs for nearly 500 miles before emptying into Lake Turkana on the border of Kenya. For thousands of years, it flooded every single year, rising over its banks, spreading rich dark silt across the plains, and then retreating to leave behind soil so fertile that even in one of the driest regions of Africa, communities could grow food, graze animals, and survive. The tribes of the Omo Valley didn't just adapt to this cycle. They built their entire civilization around it. 8 distinct tribes have called this valley home for centuries. The Mursi, the Hamar, the Karo, the Dasanak, the Bodi, the Suri, the Nyangatam, and the Kwegu. Each one speaks a different language. Each one carries different traditions, different ceremonies, different ways of reading the land. Within a stretch of barely 60 miles, you can encounter communities that have almost no common tongue, yet have lived alongside one another, sometimes in cooperation, sometimes in conflict, for longer than most nations have existed. The lower Omo River is home to over 200,000 indigenous people who have lived there for centuries. Survival International, and for most of that time, the outside world largely left them alone. The valley's remoteness protected them. The Italian colonizers who swept through much of Ethiopia in the 1930s barely penetrated this far south. Even as the rest of Africa was carved up, reorganized, and modernized through the 20th century, the Omo Valley remained something extraordinary. A place where ancient ways of living had survived not as performance or museum exhibit, but as living, breathing, evolving culture. That isolation shaped everything about who the Mursi are today. Their language, which belongs to a family called Nilo-Saharan, is spoken by no one else on Earth. Their healing practices, their conflict resolution systems, their astronomical knowledge, all of it developed in this valley, refined over generations, passed down not through writing but through conversation, ceremony, and lived experience. It is a form of human intelligence that cannot be downloaded, cannot be archived, and cannot be recreated once it is lost. The valley is also, by any measure, spectacularly, almost aggressively beautiful. Volcanic outcrops rise from the flat plains like the ruins of some ancient architecture. The riverine forests along the Omo's banks shelter wildlife that exists almost nowhere else at these densities. The light in the late afternoon turns everything the color of warm copper. Standing at the river's edge as the sun drops toward the hills, it is genuinely difficult to believe that a place this extraordinary exists and that so few people in the world know its name. But beauty, as history has shown us again and again, does not protect a place. Sometimes it does the opposite. The road to the Mursi doesn't announce itself. One moment you are on something that at least resembles a track, 2 dirt lines pressed into the earth by the wheels of vehicles that have passed this way before. And then, gradually, even that disappears. The last stretch into Mursi territory is driven more by instinct than by map, through dry scrubland where the thorned branches of acacia trees scrape against the windows and the dust rises in slow red clouds behind you. After a 2-hour journey through the Omo Valley without seeing a single person, the first sign of the Mursi comes quietly. Young men appearing one by one at the roadside, watching. Denise Dickman Blue, they carry wooden staffs. Their expressions are serious, still, completely unreadable to an outsider. They are not hostile, but they are watching in the careful, unhurried way of people who have learned not to trust the arrival of strangers too quickly, and who have been given, over the past decade, more than enough reasons to remain cautious. You park under the trees at the edge of the village, and you step out, and the first thing you notice is the silence. Not emptiness. The village is alive. People are moving, children are somewhere nearby, and you can hear them. But a quality of quiet that is almost architectural, as though the space itself has been built to absorb sound and slow everything down. The huts are small and low, constructed from bent wooden branches lashed together and covered with leaves and grass. Built entirely from tree branches and reeds, temporary by design because the Mursi are nomadic and move when conditions demand it. Denise Dickman Blue, there are no permanent foundations here. No concrete. No intention of staying forever. Every structure in this village is a statement of relationship with the land rather than dominance over it. The women are extraordinary. They move with a composure that communicates, without a single word, that they are entirely comfortable being looked at and entirely unimpressed by the fact that you have come a very long way to do so. The lip plates, the clay discs that have made the Mursi famous in every photography book and documentary about Africa, are worn with a casualness that is somehow more striking than any formal display could ever be. This is not performance. This is Tuesday. The children are the ones who break the formality. They appear from behind huts and from around corners with a universal curiosity of children everywhere, crowding close, then darting back, giggling at something one of them said, watching your every movement with enormous, luminous eyes. One small boy reaches out and touches the sleeve of your jacket with one finger, then looks up at your face to gauge your reaction, and in that single gesture is every question this encounter contains. Two worlds, meeting at the edge of each other, each one trying to figure out what the other means. The tribal leader, summoned by those watching young men on the road, arrives beneath the shade trees and begins to speak through a guide. His voice is low and even. He has done this before, received outsiders, answered their questions. But there is something beneath the practiced calm. Something he wants you to understand that the usual script of guide and tourist and photo opportunity does not quite have room for. He wants you to know that things here are not as they were. And they may not be here much longer. There is a moment, somewhere in your first hour inside a Mursi village, when you stop trying to process what you are seeing and simply let it exist in front of you. Because the Mursi do not live the way they live for your benefit. They are not performing. They are not preserving. They are simply continuing, carrying forward a way of life that was already ancient when the first European explorers were still trying to find the edges of this continent. And once that registers, once you stop filtering everything through the lens of comparison and novelty, you begin to see the extraordinary intelligence embedded in every single detail of how this community is organized. Start with the homes. What looks at first glance like simplicity, small, low, temporary structures of branch and grass, is actually a masterclass in environmental engineering. The Mursi build their huts from wooden tree branches and reeds, designed to be dismantled and relocated as living conditions change. Denise Dickman Blue, the shape minimizes wind resistance. The materials breathe in the heat. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is permanent by accident. In a landscape where the difference between survival and failure is often a single dry season, the ability to pack up your life and follow the water is not a limitation. It is the entire strategy. The cattle are central to everything. A Mursi family's wealth, status, and security are measured not in money but in livestock, and the knowledge required to keep cattle alive and healthy in the harsh microclimate of the Omo Valley represents generations of accumulated expertise. Which grazing lands to use in which season? Which plants indicate water underground? How to read the sky for weather that official forecasts will never reach this far to predict. This is not folk knowledge. This is science, developed through centuries of observation, tested against the most unforgiving classroom imaginable, and refined until it worked. The body art stops you every time you look up. The Mursi are among the most visually striking people on Earth, and they know it, but the decorations are not vanity. Scarification patterns on the arms and chest mark significant life events. Chalk and ochre painted across the face and shoulders carry spiritual meaning. The famous lip plates worn by the women are a marker of identity, beauty, and marriageability that begins in adolescence and continues throughout a woman's life. When a young woman reaches marriageable age at around 15 or 16, she begins the process of stretching her lower lip to accommodate the clay disc Denise Dickman Blue, a process she undertakes herself, on her own terms, as an assertion of who she is and where she belongs. The ceremonies are where the culture fully breathes. Donga, the Mursi stick fighting ritual, is one of the most striking things you will ever witness. Young men face each other in a structured duel, fighting not out of hatred but out of a desire to prove themselves worthy, to earn respect, to stand in front of their community and demonstrate their readiness for adulthood. The fights are fierce and physical and governed by rules that every participant understands completely. The crowd watches with an intensity that tells you this is not entertainment. This is education. This is how a community communicates its values to its youngest generation without ever writing them down. The elders sit apart, watching everything with the quiet authority of people who have already passed through every stage this village contains. They are the library, the living archive. Every story this community carries, every drought survived, every conflict resolved, every ceremony performed, is stored inside them. When an elder dies in the Omo Valley, the Mursi do not just lose a person. They lose a volume of knowledge that no one else holds and that cannot be recovered. Sitting in this village, watching all of this move around you, one thought keeps returning. This works. All of it. This is a functioning, sophisticated, deeply considered way of organizing human life. And it has worked here, in one of the harshest environments on the continent, for longer than most of the world's great civilizations have existed. Which makes what is happening to it all the more devastating. To understand what has been lost, you have to first understand what the river meant. The Omo did not simply flow past the Mursi. It was, in every practical and spiritual sense, the center of their universe. Its annual flood was the event around which the entire year was organized. The moment the river rose and spread its dark, nutrient-rich silt across the plains was the signal to plant, to celebrate, to begin again. For centuries, these indigenous groups learned to embrace the rhythms of the Omo Valley. Fishing along the river's shores, grazing cattle and goats, hunting, and planting crops in the flood-enriched soil left behind each year. African arguments. Then, in 2015, those rhythms stopped. The Gilgel Gibe III, a 250-meter dam, the tallest in Africa, was switched on, plugging the Omo River and capturing its waters in a reservoir with a capacity of 6 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. African arguments, the annual flood, which had arrived without fail for thousands of years, simply did not come. And with it went everything built on top of it. The crops failed. Without the flood-deposited silt, the soil along the riverbanks lost its fertility almost immediately. Families who had grown their own food for generations suddenly could not. Cattle that had grazed on floodplain grasses began to go hungry as the vegetation dried and died. The Mursi and other groups could no longer live off the diverse ecological zones they once moved between, the grasslands, the mountainous areas, the bushland, and the riverbanks, because the plantations and the loss of the flood had severed the connection between those zones and the survival strategies built around them. African arguments. But the dam was only the beginning. In 2012, the government began clearing dense bushland, land where the Bodi and Mursi cultivated crops in the rainy season and kept their beehives, to make way for commercial sugarcane plantations. African arguments, hundreds of thousands of acres of indigenous land. Gone. Not gradually. Not through negotiation. Cleared, fenced off, and handed over to industrial agriculture while the people who had lived on that land for centuries were told to move into resettlement villages and become sedentary farmers. The cruelty of that instruction cannot be overstated. The Mursi are nomadic not by preference but by necessity. Their movement across the landscape is not wandering. It is a precise, seasonal response to an environment that demands flexibility to survive. The government's insistence that people become sedentary farmers does not work in the plains African arguments, and in practice, it has not worked. The resettlement villages have inadequate services. The food aid promised to replace what the land once provided arrives irregularly, or not at all. Families who were entirely self-sufficient a generation ago now depend on a government that has already demonstrated it does not prioritize their survival. In 2019, a brutal disarmament campaign saw security forces kill dozens of Mursi and Bodi people, including women, children, and elders. African arguments without their weapons, the Mursi could no longer protect their cattle from wild animals or defend themselves from rival groups in the increasingly resource-scarce valley. Some herders began traveling further and further in search of grazing land, crossing into Kenya's Lake Turkana region, a desperate journey that has led to deadly confrontations. Meanwhile, the Mursi have become increasingly dependent on the tourists who periodically arrive in their villages, offering small payments in exchange for photographs. African arguments, a transaction that, however well-intentioned, has begun to reshape the culture it claims to admire. When your most reliable source of income is being looked at, there is a slow, subtle pressure to become more of what people come to see. The lip plates that were once markers of personal identity become props. The ceremonies that were once communal rituals become scheduled performances. Nobody intends for this to happen. It happens anyway. The river is still there. You can still stand at its banks and watch it move south toward Lake Turkana, still brown and heavy and ancient-looking. But it no longer floods. The rhythms are gone. And in their absence, a civilization built across centuries is trying to find a new way to survive, in a landscape that has been fundamentally, perhaps irreversibly, changed around it. Standing at the riverbank with a Mursi elder as he watches the water, his expression carries something that does not need translation. He remembers what this river used to do. And he knows it will never do it again. Something happens when you put the camera down. When you stop framing and composing and capturing, and you simply sit, inside the shade of the village, beside a fire, near the place where the women are working, something shifts. The formality dissolves. And what replaces it is something far more valuable than any photograph. People. Just people. A grandmother braiding a child's hair with the same absent, automatic tenderness that grandmothers everywhere have always used. Two young men arguing about something with the animated, slightly theatrical energy of people who have been friends long enough to disagree loudly without meaning it. A woman nursing an infant while carrying on a conversation across the clearing, her attention split between three things at once in the universal multitasking of motherhood. This is what the documentaries miss. Not the lip plates, not the body paint, not the ceremonies. Those things are real and they matter. But they are the surface. Underneath them are people with interior lives as rich and complicated as anyone you have ever met anywhere in the world. People with opinions, with humor, with grievances, with ambitions, with things that make them laugh and things they are afraid of at night. Through the guide, a conversation opens up with a young Mursi woman named Ngarmi. She is perhaps 20 years old, with the composed, direct gaze of someone who has been looked at by strangers her entire life and has made peace with it on her own terms. She talks about her children. She has two, both young, and about what she wants for them. Her answer, delivered without hesitation, is not so different from what any parent anywhere would say. She wants them to be safe. She wants them to have enough to eat. She wants them to know who they are. That last part, she says, is the one she worries about most. Because the older ones, the teenagers, the young adults, are leaving. Not all of them, not yet. But enough that the village notices the absences. They go to the towns. Some go to Jinka, the nearest city. They come back changed, or they don't come back at all. The modern world offers real benefits, proper healthcare, clean water, and for a generation watching their traditional livelihoods collapse, those benefits are increasingly difficult to refuse. No roads to follow. Ngarmi does not blame them, but she sits with the weight of it in a way that is very quiet and very heavy. The village is still full today. The fires are still burning. The cattle are still here. But she can feel it, the slow, invisible pull of a world that does not know her name and does not need her permission to change everything around her. When the sun drops and the air cools and the cooking fires are lit, the Mursi tell stories. They have always told stories. In a community with no written language, stories are the infrastructure. They carry history, law, moral instruction, and identity all at once, wrapped inside narratives vivid enough to survive the journey from one generation to the next without losing their shape. The elder who has been watching us all day finally sits close enough to speak directly. Through the guide, slowly, he begins. He tells a story that his own grandfather told him, about a time before anyone alive can remember, when the Omo flooded so massively that the entire valley floor disappeared beneath the water for weeks. The people climbed to higher ground and waited. They were not afraid, he says, because the river had always come back. The flood was not a disaster. It was a visit. It came, it gave everything it had, and it left. And in what it left behind, the dark, rich smell of river silt drying in the morning sun, was everything the people needed to survive another year. His grandfather's grandfather had told the same story. And his before that. The river as provider. The river as calendar. The river as the oldest relationship his people had ever known. He stops speaking. The fire moves between us. Somewhere behind him, in the dark outside the firelight, a child laughs at something and then goes quiet. He looks at the guide and says something short. The guide turns to us. He says the river still runs. But it has forgotten us. No one speaks for a long moment. There are histories that live in libraries and histories that live in people. The Mursi carry the second kind, fragile, irreplaceable, and dependent entirely on the existence of the community that holds them. Every story this elder carries will require someone younger to carry it next. And every year, the circle of people willing and able to receive it grows a little smaller. This is not mythology. This is not folklore in the dismissive sense that word is sometimes used. This is memory. And memory, once broken, does not heal. There is an hour in the Omo Valley, just before the sun fully surrenders to the horizon, when the entire landscape turns the color of an old wound healing. The dust goes gold. The acacia trees go black against the sky. The cattle moving slowly back toward the village become silhouettes, their bells making the only sound for what feels like miles in every direction. And the people of the village, moving through that light, look exactly like what they are: ancient, dignified, completely at home in a landscape that would defeat almost anyone else. It is impossible to stand in that light and feel only grief. Because here is what is also true: the Mursi are still here. After the dam. After the plantations. After the resettlements and the disarmament campaigns and the slow suffocation of everything their economy depended on. After all of it, they are still painting their bodies in the morning, still gathering at the river, still performing the ceremonies that mark a young person's passage into adulthood, still telling stories around fires at night. Resilience is an overused word. But there is no better one for what you witness in this village. The women have adapted their craft, selling beadwork and small handmade objects to the tourists who occasionally arrive, threading the outside world's money into the fabric of their survival without, at least for now, letting it unravel everything underneath. The younger men who have returned from the towns bring back knowledge of the outside world that the community is slowly, carefully, deciding what to do with. A few families have begun advocating, through local organizations and increasingly through international attention, for their land rights, for recognition, for the basic legal acknowledgement that this valley belongs to the people who have lived in it since before the concept of ownership existed. The tribes of the Omo Valley's cultural identity and way of life are under increasing pressure from the outside world. ORYX photo tours, but pressure is not yet erasure. And the difference between those two things is still, however narrowly, in the hands of the people who live here. The sun finishes its descent. The valley goes dark and enormous and full of stars in a way that cities have made most of the world forget is possible. The fires in the village burn brighter against the darkness. They are still burning. If anything in this film has made you want to come here, good. You should. Responsible, respectful tourism is one of the few economic forces that currently works in the Mursi's favor, and your presence, done right, genuinely matters. Here is what you need to know. The Omo Valley is accessed most practically by flying into Addis Ababa, Ethiopia's capital, and then taking a connecting domestic flight to Jinka, the closest town to Mursi territory and your base for the visit. From Jinka, guides can arrange tours that fit different budgets, and hiring a knowledgeable local guide is not optional. It is essential. No roads to follow. The roads into Mursi territory are rough, unmarked, and in the rainy season nearly impassable. A four-wheel drive vehicle is non-negotiable. Go with a local guide, always. Not a third-party operator running groups of 20 tourists through the village on a schedule. A local guide, ideally someone with genuine relationships inside the community, who can facilitate real interaction, handle permissions properly, and ensure that the money you spend actually reaches the people you came to see. Most of the tourism industry in the Omo Valley is controlled by outsiders, with indigenous communities receiving only a small fraction of the benefits. African arguments. Choosing carefully where your money goes is one of the most important decisions you will make before you arrive. Ask before you photograph. This sounds obvious, but it is violated constantly. The Mursi are famously uncomfortable with unsolicited photography. They do not want their photos taken without permission. Denise Dickman Blue, and the small payments that have become customary for portraits are a double-edged arrangement that deserves more thought than most visitors give it. If you pay for a photograph, pay fairly. If someone indicates they don't want to be photographed, that answer is complete. Best time to visit is October through January. After the rainy season, when the roads are accessible and the light is extraordinary. Avoid April and May when heavy rains make the region nearly unreachable. What to bring? Cash in US dollars or Ethiopian bear, a serious supply of water, sun protection without exception, and something to contribute if the opportunity presents itself. Several local organizations working in the valley accept donations that go directly toward community health, education, and land rights advocacy. Your guide can point you toward legitimate ones. And finally, come slowly. This is not a destination for a half-day excursion between other stops on an itinerary. The Omo Valley rewards patience. Sit longer than feels comfortable. Ask more questions than feel polite. Let the place show you what it actually is, rather than what you arrived expecting to see. You will leave with something that cannot be bought, archived, or replicated. And you will understand, in your bones, why it must not be allowed to disappear. I have been to many places in my life that moved me, but I have never been anywhere that made me feel the weight of human time the way the Omo Valley did. Standing in that valley, watching the Mursi move through their morning with the unhurried authority of people who have belonged to a place for thousands of years, something fundamental shifts inside you. Something that is difficult to name and impossible to unfeel. We live in a world that is very good at moving forward, at building, expanding, modernizing, optimizing. We are less good at stopping to ask what we are leaving behind. And what we are leaving behind, in valleys like this one, in communities like the Mursi, is not primitive. It is not outdated. It is not a lesser version of something that we have since improved upon. It is knowledge. It is memory. It is an entirely different answer to the question of how a human life can be lived. An answer developed over millennia, tested against one of the harshest environments on Earth, and refined until it worked. And it is disappearing. Not because it failed, but because the world outside it is moving too fast and too carelessly to notice what it is destroying in its path. The Mursi do not need our pity. They do not need our charity. They need the one thing that costs nothing to give and that we have so far withheld almost completely. They need to be seen. Not photographed. Not documented. Not turned into content. Seen as what they are. As people whose continued existence on their ancestral land is not a request. It is a right. If this film did anything, I hope it made that impossible to look away from. The fires in the Omo Valley are still burning tonight. The question is whether we care enough to help keep them lit.